Hello, my name is Cody. Welcome to the Unifying Field podcast, where we journey beyond the black and white into the vast spectrum of human experience. Here we explore the great question of why we are here, seeking wisdom in all traditions and unity in our diversity. My mission is to bridge worlds, uniting hearts and minds through conversation, curiosity, and the shared wonder of existence. So take a deep breath in through your nose. Open your mind and join me as we step into the infinite together. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. God created all things, beginning with the heavens and the earth, then brought light and darkness, water and sky, dry land, vegetation, animals, and finally humanity. Then existence began learning to live in this new physical world with all of its beauty and hardship, life and death, creation and destruction. And it continued on, creating and destroying, mindlessly and autonomously. Empires would rise and conquer the weak, and just like with the animals in nature, humanity continued the primitive idea of mindless creation and destruction. From time to time, a soul would remember their divinity. During meditation, they would see the truth of creation and stare back into the eyes of God, who was quietly and calmly staring back at them with unconditional love. The human was staring back into the eyes of the parent. The parent was staring into the eyes of their child. As the human looked a little closer, they started to see that it was themselves staring back at them. And they would contemplate how things are, contemplating what brought Earth and humanity to its current state. And they would begin to teach their fellow humans. And thus other souls would begin to look back into the eyes of the Creator God and realize that too, that the eyes they are staring into are their own. While many looked up in anger towards God, and others worshipped and prayed for better days, those few stared curiously into the eyes of God. They soon found that they are the creator gods and began experimenting by speaking with their newfound power. For what they held inside, they spoke into existence. If they held destruction inside, they expressed destruction outwardly. And if they held creation inside, they spoke creation outwardly. And thus, if they held hatred in their hearts, they sowed more seeds of hatred and would reap the poisonous berries of hatred that would poison whoever their words touched. But when they held the same unconditional love that they saw when looking into the eyes of God, they sowed the beautiful fruit of unconditional love and reaped a harvest of unconditional love. Seeing the truth of the state of the world, filled with its lusts for pleasure and power, death and destruction, they began to teach others who were willing to listen. Of course, a world that's asleep kills those who go against the grain. The world would continue on. World leaders would dream of conquering other nations, expanding their land and resources. Military leaders would create battle strategies to make those dreams come true, fantasizing about destructive weapons, defense gear, and the best trained warriors. Those beneath them would build and train their armies to create a capable and ready force. Engineers and scientists would bring weapon ideas into concept and create working models. Factories would take the specifications of the weapons and gear and create assembly lines to mass produce them to fulfill the war needs. And upon reaching readiness, they carry out their plan to conquer other nations. City planners use their own ideas, as well as ideas from members of the community, to work to ensure that a city develops with the ability to take care of its people and their needs. Some of those needs include medical, security, education, transportation, trash, and sewage needs, as well as creating a balance of residential, commercial, and recreational spaces, all of which began as thoughts. Architects would bring ideas and concepts of building structures into creative visuals and transform them into building plans. And builders of various specialties would take those plans and their construction knowledge to bring that imagination into physical reality. Eventually, the buildings would be populated by businesses and residents who would continue producing ideas and building their worlds. Everyday individual humans would think and create their lives, for better or worse. They would have dreams and make decisions. Education, marriage partners, and having children, careers, and so on. Learning through achieving successes and making mistakes. Ever planning their lives, altering its direction, and moving forward. The cycle of creation and destruction, ever expressing itself outwardly through the word from all who inhabit earth. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was given to humankind, and humankind carried the torch of the Word with free will to create or destroy as they choose, and most chose destruction, for the illusion that encapsulates earth was ever powerful. But from time to time, someone would be born into this world to help them understand the truth. Some would learn and teach, but the masses would skew the teachings and create religions that kept most in the belief of helplessness and worship and prayer for better things to come. In the beginning was the Word. With just a word, God spoke creation into existence. That same idea shows up in traditions all over the world. In Hinduism, Shiva is said to be able to create new worlds simply by uttering Aum. I've worked with many mantras myself. Om Namah Shivaya, Shri Ram Jai Ram, Hare Krishna, Om Mani Padme Hum, Yo Heka Yo Ho. Even the simple Om. And I felt how sound shapes the mind and opens doors. But here's the thing. You don't have to be God or Shiva to see this power. Every single one of us creates with our words every single day. Even in the most basic sense, we can brighten someone's day through a compliment. Or we could equally ruin someone's day by spewing hateful words towards them. No matter what is spoken, it creates or destroys in some way, even on a small level. If we hold on to hatred within us, it is likely going to be reflected into the world through our interactions with it. If we hold on to love and peace, the same truth holds. Our inner world is reflected outwardly. Perhaps our reach may not be as vast as that of God or Shiva, or maybe it is and we just haven't realized it yet. But we are creators of our personal worlds and contribute to the creation of other beings' worlds. We're actually incredibly powerful if we think about it. You are the creator God of your world. Wield your power consciously with respect. So if our words and thoughts carry this power to create, to heal, or to wound, the question becomes, what are we actually doing with that power? Are we living it out? Or are we only admiring it from afar? That's where the difference between knowledge and wisdom comes in. Knowledge is easy to collect, but wisdom only comes when we practice what we know. How much of your spiritual study do you put into practice? The knowledge that is available to the seeker is vast and beautiful. There are countless quotes that can inspire you from the most beautiful souls to have ever walked the earth. I myself find that I have put them on pedestals from time to time in my own journey, meaning I believed they could do way more than what I could ever do because they seemed so special, and I am not. Jesus, according to the Bible, did many miraculous things, but he also said that we can do all these things and more that he is able to do. And I believe that. I believe we are capable of miraculous things such as healing. And he also said that if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could tell that mountain to cast itself into the ocean, and it would. But again, it is easier said than done to walk the walk than it is to talk the talk. So then I became a walking encyclopedia of spirituality. I knew things, but putting it into practice was a different story. Learning for the sake of gaining knowledge is fine. We all have things we're interested in. I think it is helpful that we have people out there who are scholars on any number of texts. Scholars of the Bible, and then the Hebrew, Greek, and Latin languages, all of which help us with more accurately translating texts. There are scholars on the cultural side of things which focus on what life was like for peoples of different times, and of course, with the many other belief systems. You have scholars of religions, mythology, and so on. These scholars help us be a little more honest with the interpretations of the texts that are available to us. But the texts only provide knowledge, not wisdom. And no matter the expert level of a person on a given subject, we're all still reading materials that were skewed through rational human minds. To be a scholar means you have vast knowledge on a subject, but to be wise means you can put it into practice in the real world. After a certain point, I had enough of learning for the sake of learning because I found that my life was lacking in a lot of areas. If I couldn't put the knowledge I have into practice, what good is it? I could pass a written test but couldn't do anything else with it. What led me to this mindset of wanting to put knowledge into practice? It was realizing that wisdom doesn't start in books or ideas. It starts in the mirror. I had to confront myself and the life I had created. I know, you didn't create everything about your life. We'll get to that in just a moment. But I found that part of spiritual work is simply fixing the things that are wrong with our lives. And confronting ourselves, I find, is easier to do when your life circumstances suck. As you are kind of in that point where you can either blame the world and everything else for where you are at, and perhaps stay and let it get worse. Or you can take responsibility for where your life is, and then find a way to make your circumstances better. And not doing anything and staying in undesirable circumstances is not actually the easier path of the two. Not doing anything seems easier, but you ultimately have to endure the suffering for a lot longer than maybe you have to. I, for sure, am guilty of blaming the world for my circumstances. For some of us, the world is to blame for some atrocious things. Listen, there is a fact of life that we get dealt shit sandwiches that we have little or no control over. We can't really choose our parents, the environment we are raised in, our genetics that have been passed down to us, freak accidents, and things inflicted on us by others. Some of us are blessed in many of those areas. However, if the stock market collapses and we lose all of our retirement money because a bunch of rich people did some bad things, if we're in a war zone and we lose everything when our house and even our town is destroyed by missiles, perhaps you were in a car accident and became crippled in some way, or something awful happened to you as an innocent child. There's endless scenarios that can really screw us up and put us in a hopeless place where change doesn't seem possible. And perhaps the hardest part, outside of the physical obstacles that are in our way, we might find ourselves having a mind that has been conditioned to believe that there is no way out of our situation. Trauma has a nasty way of pinning people in this kind of hellish realm that is incredibly powerful in such an unfair way. I've seen what it does to the people I care about, and it creates this impossible world for some people that drags them into one hell scenario after another, leaving them completely hopeless for things to change. That is why I say it makes operating in this world unfair for some. Because outside of it being unfair for the ones who went through what they did, it really makes it next to impossible for them to even try to find a way to overcome their struggles. And because their wheel of life is spinning with so much momentum in the negative direction, those people just continue to be run over by everything in their life, with no remorse, just a constant torture session that is lifelong. It's a fucked up side of life that I am not fond of. I'm not sure why we are given the lives we are given. I've had some pretty tough struggles and lessons in my own life, but hear all the time of stories of people who have it way worse than you. From our tiny human perspective, it is not fair. Good people endure the most awful things, and there is nothing we can do about it, outside of being a good person yourself and lending a hand when able. Be the change you wish to see in the world, right? From a higher self perspective, perhaps incarnating here is a school, and on some level, some of us are working on harder lessons than others. But you can't say that for sure, because even though we may ultimately be spirit, we're still human, and there are countless human beings that are hurting. And it is hell for us who are watching helplessly, praying that they can find a way to overcome. Then on top of all the circumstances that we begin with, we start making decisions, for better or worse, which moves us further into the places we presently find ourselves. Another fact of life is that we must make decisions. Even staying in place and not going one direction or another is a decision which shapes our present place we find ourselves. Perhaps there is even a little luck involved, like you being in the right or wrong place at the right or wrong time. Is it chance, luck, fate, or destiny? Who knows? But while our struggles are full of pain, it is easier to get moving and make changes if we are uncomfortable. This is why I think suffering is a blessing in disguise if we choose to accept the gift. The times I am suffering are when I have always been closest to God, though today I try to stay close regardless of if I'm suffering. We all need help from time to time. We may find that people give us a helping hand through our struggles, but who is ultimately responsible for getting us to a better place? Wherever we find ourselves, it is up to us to get ourselves to a better place. Whatever happened to you that was not in your control is not fair at all. Awful things happen to good people all the time. And even though people might try to help us at points in our lives, and in some situations, people do save us from situations like burning buildings and car accidents. But it is otherwise ultimately up to us to save ourselves. You cannot save someone who doesn't want to be saved. We must make the decision to fix the parts of ourselves that need attention. We can't always control what happens to us, but we can choose what we do next. And when we stop and look honestly at our lives, certain patterns start to appear. Sometimes they're small habits. Other times they're chains that keep us bound. Addictions, distractions, cycles of thought or word that weigh us down. For me, one of the clearest places this showed up was in addiction. Addiction is something that most people have to deal with. Drugs, nicotine, drinking, social media, porn, food, cosmetics, exercise, and so on. Yeah, even seemingly healthy things such as exercise and eating healthy can be detrimental in some scenarios. My older brother Kevin dealt with drug addiction for a long time. I remember hearing stories of him panhandling for money on the corner, as well as seeing him beg my dad for money to buy his kids presents near Christmas time, of which none of it went to the kids and all went to buying more drugs. I remember seeing all of the heartache my dad went through, trying to save him in the only ways he thought he could. My dad has the biggest heart, by the way. But the only person who can save anyone when it comes to overcoming our obstacles is ourselves. No one could have saved Kevin but himself. And in 2015, the day before he was going back to rehab, he got loaded up on drugs one final time before overdosing and passing away. I as well have struggled with addiction. I was addicted to smokeless tobacco, or dipping as we call it in the South. And I was addicted to dipping for 25 plus years. I had quit several times. I quit for several months when first starting for the Air Force. I quit for a year on my final deployment to Afghanistan. I quit many other times. But I always started back when I was going through some kind of a struggle. If I was going through a breakup, I would start back. And honestly, that was most of my excuses for relapsing, the pain of going through breakups. And every time I took that next dip, I thought it would help me through my problems. But it let me down every single time. It was never worth that one time to enjoy that old friend once more, because then I was hooked again. Today I'm happy to be almost 3 years free from nicotine. November 12th will make 3 years. Quitting dipping took willpower. It took me saying that no matter what life throws at me, no matter how painful, I will not dip. And after about a year and a half or 2 years, I finally no longer thought of dipping when something bad happened. I might think of food or snacks, but not nicotine. I absolutely gained a dad bod during that time, and every pound I added was well worth it, as a lot of times we have to make sacrifices to reach our goals. I am sure we all find ourselves at some point blaming the world for our situations. I could have blamed the country setting that I grew up in and the countless people around me who dipped, but I was the one who chose to do it. But expecting to be perfect every day is not realistic. Some days we get stuck blaming the world. Other days we get tired of our own excuses and finally take a step forward. That step, however small, is where the real work begins. And make no mistake, that work isn't separate from spirituality. In fact, I would argue it is the very foundation of it. You might say, "Hey Cody, how is breaking addictions, getting in shape, and getting my finances in order considered spiritual work?" Let me ask you this. When you are sick and tired, how motivated are you to do anything else but what you have to do for the day? How much better could you focus on meditation if your diet was a little cleaner and you added a little exercise? Could you be more connected to the spiritual realm if you were a little healthier? If your finances are constantly stressing you out because you struggle to make ends meet, how much more could you focus on God if your attention wasn't fixated on that stress? If you enjoy helping by donating money, how much more could you help people who are less fortunate if you are building financial stability for yourself? Doing anything to make ourselves better, I believe, gives us a more stable foundation to perform spiritual work. Being mindful of the foods you put into your body and the words you speak into the world helps you live more consciously and disciplined, making you a more mindful world creator. And starting literally anywhere and doing literally anything that starts you walking in a better direction is all that is required. By taking even tiny steps forward in any goal, we can begin to learn discipline. Unfortunately, though we may have built discipline at points in our life, discipline is not something that stays with us for life. It is an active practice in itself that must be cultivated and nourished. For example, I was disciplined with exercise in the military. In fact, I was a machine back then, running trail marathons, learning mixed martial arts and Krav Maga, and then ending the days with weightlifting. But I was also single. I had little else to do with my free time, and there was a fitness standard I had to maintain. Today I have a family. I'm 12 years older, and exercise and time doesn't come as easy as it once did. It's tough to even keep up with keeping my house clean enough for my baby to crawl around on the floor. And of course, taking care of my 2 little girls takes a lot of time and effort as well. My life is super busy with things such as working full time, trying to find time to formulate and write ideas for this podcast, a little bit of exercise and a meditation routine, and so on. This is the reality for a lot of people. Though we might be blessed with a full life, we're just busy, and doing anything outside of the routine is really hard. So we learn that we must first start walking with whatever goal we want to work on. Not running, but walking. Because while we can make short-term improvements that will improve our life's aspects for a moment, real lasting change is way better. It's not just better for our physical worlds, but for our spiritual growth. Goodness, I've been known to dive headfirst into anything that interests me. I will dive straight into the deep end and become the world's foremost expert on the subject. Or similarly, I've been known to work out so much that I dive straight into overuse injuries. And guess what? That motivation you once had to maintain a consistent exercise routine is lost when you have to rest and heal for several months. Of course you can rebuild, but how many of us do? And I still act this way sometimes. But burnout and injury are good ways to put you back to where you started, back to square one with no more motivation to keep improving your life. Jordan Peterson had one idea I found particularly helpful. That idea was to start really small to get yourself to begin walking towards the goal. If you can't get yourself to do that small thing, then it is too big of a task at that moment. So you do something a little smaller and then see if that is small enough that you will be able to do the task. And you keep decreasing the size of the task until you are able to take a step. You can always go smaller with your steps. Eventually your step will be something so embarrassingly easy that you can get yourself to do it. And then you try to do it again the next day. If you couldn't do it the next day, it was too big of a step. And so you keep working this until you start walking every day towards some kind of a goal. Where do you start walking to? It doesn't matter. Just start walking. Whatever you can build discipline in will translate to your spiritual work. You can always fine-tune your path as you go. But what you're ultimately working on in the beginning is building the discipline to start something and stick with it. What I found is that I followed this method before I ever knew Jordan Peterson had taught this. But regardless, it is a solid method. For my initial goal, I wanted to meditate every single day, no matter what. That is doable. If I put a minimum time on that, say 30 minutes or an hour every single day, that would be too difficult, and I would instead find excuses to not meditate. However, by leaving it open-ended by saying, I want to meditate every day, no matter what, I can find 5 minutes, even during the days when I don't want to focus on my breath or a short guided meditation. Leaving it open-ended left room for me to meditate for an hour if I felt like, or 5 minutes when I made every excuse in the world to be lazy, as 5 minutes was still small enough that it wasn't a burden to complete. Regardless of the amount of time, I still reap the benefits of meditating every day for what is working on a year. Small steps. Today, I spend a minimum of 30 minutes every day for spiritual work, which includes meditation. Meditation is obviously spiritual, but it doesn't have to be. For me, it started out as survival. I was depressed and needed something to ground me. When life is heavy, sometimes the easiest time to get moving is when you have nothing left to lose. And you know, there's a really neat thing that happens when you start moving. Over time, that daily practice gave me discipline, and that discipline spilled over into other areas. For example, I had gained a lot of weight after quitting dipping, and exercise became the next step. But here's the hard truth. I couldn't just pick up where I left off 12 years ago. I used to be able to knock out 10 clean pull-ups in my worst physical shape. But after many years away from the gym and 40 extra pounds, I was lucky to be able to complete one pull-up. That was humbling. So I had to be honest with where I was starting, lower my expectations, and take small steps again. Assistance bands helped, but the real shift was in my mindset. I stopped chasing the version of me I used to be and focused on the version of me I was right then. And that lesson carries into the spiritual path. Maybe your goal is enlightenment, to move mountains and walk on water. That's great. But like fitness, you have to start where you are. Set real human goals. Even daily household chores such as keeping up with the dishes, making your bed, and folding clothes translate into real spiritual growth. Take small, steady steps. Just get moving. Because here's the trap. I think it's human to want to skip ahead. That's what is known as spiritual bypassing. Just like you can't go from the couch to a marathon overnight. You can't leap from zero discipline and lots of blocks to enlightened master overnight. You might get a glimpse of the heavenly realms through meditation or psychedelics, and that glimpse can be beautiful, even helpful for your growth. But if you haven't worked through what holds you down, you'll get pulled back again and again. And the world you are actively creating will certainly reflect that. Ask me how I know. You have to walk before you can run. What happens when you ignore things that you know you should fix, and then try to progress faster than you are spiritually ready for? You may find that you do progress, perhaps substantially, but you may also find that the world is still able to get under your skin. The issues you suppressed because you didn't want to associate with them are still lying there, waiting for the time that you are ready to take them out for a stroll. You say, well, I don't want to take them out for a stroll. I'm done with those things. That's the old me. The new me is way better than that. Hey, that is a good attitude to have toward the things you wish to change. But when you are all love and light and someone upsets you, are you sure that you're done with that side of yourself? My own experience has shown that avoiding those things doesn't make them go away. It makes them surprise you when something happens that triggers them to come out and take control of your once peaceful, enlightened world. It is not a pleasant experience, and I used to have mental breakdowns because I knew I was better than the way I acted. I knew better. I had knowledge, but I still wasn't able to put it into practice. This is where being honest with ourselves about where we are in our journey and what could use some work is key. Pay attention. Every moment of our lives is a lesson, and the problems will be brought to light as life relentlessly brings our worst qualities to the surface via our interactions with the world. And if we remain unconscious to our reactions, we will react in the same way over and over again. Paying attention is better. I know, easier said than done. Boy, do I know. Mastery takes practice. One of my biggest struggles has been anger. It seems to run in my family. When someone presses the right buttons, especially someone close to me, I'm ready for a fight. Not physically, but verbally. And if I know I'm in the wrong, sometimes I'll still push back just to make the other person look worse. Vindictive, you could say. That's not something I'm proud of. But here's the thing. The more awareness I place on it, the more light I shine on that shadow aspect, and the less power it has over me. It's still there, but now I'm learning to meet it with awareness instead of letting it run wild. Of course, consistent meditation and becoming responsible for my life has helped a lot with this. One of the problems I see in religion is how it often shifts responsibility away from the person. Everything gets placed on some higher power, heavenly or demonic. You're told not to focus on yourself because that's considered selfish. I've for sure been told that many times. You're told just to pray, glorify God, and hope things get better. But does that really work? I think there's a better way. What if we formed a working relationship with God, where both sides are active? Instead of only praying for things to change, why not pray for what you want? Visualize it as if it's already done, like Jesus once spoke of, and then take the steps you can. That's when God meets you halfway. That's when doors start to open. Because shifting responsibility elsewhere doesn't help you overcome the parts of you that hold you down. I'm not saying spiritual forces don't exist. I believe they do. But whether it's through building discipline, practicing self-control, seeing a therapist, or uprooting blocks through meditation, the work is still ours to do. We are the ones who must do those things. When I first began my spiritual journey with meditation, I thought the path was about escaping, getting high, leaving behind the parts of myself I didn't like. But it's not about escape. It's about honesty. Ram Dass said, anything you push away has got you. You can't push anything away if you want to be free. Freedom is the goal, becoming nobody, free from the chains of anger, ego, and whatever else holds us down. And that begins with being honest about where we are, stepping back far enough to see it, and then taking even the smallest steps in a positive direction. Freedom isn't about escaping who you are. It's about being honest with yourself, facing what's really there, and working with it. That's the path, step by step, in honesty and discipline toward becoming free. And now we come full circle. We began by waking up to our situation, realizing we have been sleepwalking through life, letting things just happen to us. Along the way, we've done some damage control, built discipline, and faced shadow aspects that once held us down. Here's the truth. Everything in our lives began with a thought. Buildings rise because an architect once imagined them. Nations fall because of ideas carried out by armies. The same principle applies to our own lives. We are architects of our worlds. While we cannot control the thoughts and actions of others, we can take full responsibility for what we hold in our own minds. Our culture wants us to believe we are nothing more than flesh, bound by circumstance and limits. But the truth is far greater. We are powerful beyond measure. As within, so without. What we carry inside shapes everything outside. Inner turmoil spills into our actions. Suppressed pain distorts our world. And unresolved fear colors every interaction. Yet when we face ourselves honestly, shine light on our shadows, and cultivate discipline, we begin to transform. Poison becomes nourishment. Chaos becomes creation. And what was barren begins to bloom. And perhaps then we see the deeper meaning of those words. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The torch was passed down to us. We hold the same creative power to speak life or destruction into existence. by facing ourselves, shining light on our darkness, and realizing just how powerful we are. We claim that power consciously. When we look inward and see God, we also discover that what looks back is not separate from us. It is us. We are more powerful than we once believed, and each new day is a chance to start fresh, even if our lives are a bit messy. So we stop walking the path of destruction and instead speak a new beginning. In the beginning was the Word. With every word, every thought, every action, we are shaping creation. The world outside us mirrors the world within. The people in our lives, even the most difficult ones, are mirrors too, helping us see what needs light. The challenges we face may be hard, sometimes brutal, but they are also invitations. Each one gives us another chance to rise above the pitfalls of the past. And with time, we grow wise. We become conscious creators, adding fruit instead of destruction, building instead of tearing down. We inspire others not by preaching, but by example. So look in the mirror, honestly and humbly. See where you are. Take the next step. Don't just collect spiritual knowledge. Live it. Practice it. Let it transform you until, in your own life, you become the change you wish to see in the world. Thank you for joining me on this journey today with the Unifying Field podcast. We've touched on just a fraction of the vastness that connects us all. But remember, the exploration never ends. Keep asking questions, keep seeking answers, and stay curious. As we part ways, may you carry a little more wonder, a little more peace, and a renewed sense of connection with the world around you. Until next time, take a deep breath, question everything, and remember, the infinite is always within reach. Please like and subscribe, and share with anyone you think may enjoy this type of content.